Thanks so much for your time, Michaelia. Appreciate it. 140 nations, including our AUKUS partner, now the UK, has recognised Palestine, albeit with some caveats. What's wrong with Australia doing the same?
Well, let's be very clear. Mr Albanese yesterday, in recognising a Palestinian state while terrorists still control Gaza, has basically rewarded terrorism. That is completely, totally and utterly unacceptable.
Michaelia, Laura, I think on that issue, that Hamas still completely control Gaza, but this has happened as Israel has now announced a full takeover of the Gaza Strip. So does Hamas
at this point in time, Laura?
Right, OK.
At this point in time, yes, they do. But let's also be clear that this is now unconditional recognition. Penny Wong has confirmed that. Anthony Albanese has confirmed that. In other words, none of the conditions that Mr Albanese and Penny Wong had been talking about all of this year need to be met. That is an outrageous position to be in. In particular, they have not demanded the release of the hostages. I mean, Hamas have been very clear. They have welcomed other countries recognising a Palestinian state. And do you know what they've said? This is a fruit of October the 7th. So it is reckless. It is disappointing, but more than that, it does nothing to change the situation on the ground for the Palestinian people.
What is your position then? What is the coalition's position on foreign policy when it comes to Israel, Gaza and recognising Palestine?
Well, we have been very, very clear. We remain committed to a two-state solution. In the first instance, Hamas must release the hostages. Secondly, Hamas must be removed from controlling the Gaza Strip. And thirdly, genuine peace negotiations need to be entered into by both parties. But what Mr Albanese did yesterday, and I saw today, Laura, it was quite a bizarre press conference. Mr Albanese was trying to say that the decision yesterday would somehow isolate Hamas. Mr Albanese has got to be kidding himself. Hamas effectively control the Gaza Strip.
I don't see
Hamas
how.
will not
Michaelia,
see the decision.
How. We've just seen Benjamin Netanyahu announce a full takeover of Gaza.
And that has not yet commenced.
I mean, it does, yeah, but it does look like a car park. We see 2 million people displaced. How much control does Hamas really have? They have political control. They're controlling the propaganda message. But what are we talking about here? Because when you talk about your solution here, a political solution and recognising Palestine, it's still unclear where the lines are.
When you say where the lines are, that's a question that also Mr Albanese now needs to answer, because what has he actually recognised? There is no state in existence. You normally recognise a state when it is in existence. So Mr Albanese has made a statement recognising a state that does not have any borders.
Wait for what exactly? Wait for what? A full takeover?
Oh, we've been very clear.
A full takeover from Israel? But then...
Hold on, Laura.
Sorry.
Just hold on for 2 seconds. Recognition needs to come at the end of the peace process. We have been very clear about that. In the first instance, the hostages must be released. I am very surprised that Mr Albanese has gone ahead with symbolic recognition, because that's all it is ultimately. There is no state to recognise, but he has not demanded from Hamas the release of the hostages. Laura, you and I both know Hamas could actually end this war tomorrow. It could stop the suffering of the civilians in Gaza if it released the hostages and laid down its arms. The question that Mr Albanese needs to answer is this. How does Mr Albanese's announcement yesterday take any steps towards the release of the hostages and Hamas ultimately laying down its arms and surrendering?
Well, what was the status quo doing? I would ask you, what was the status quo doing to release the hostages? I would argue not much either.
Well, again, recognising a Palestinian state does nothing more and nothing less than embolden terrorism. I mean, Marco Rubio was very, very clear when, and he's been, as you know, involved directly in the ceasefire negotiations. When President Macron of France stood up and announced that France would be recognising a Palestinian state, that is when Hamas basically walked away from the ceasefire negotiations that were underway. So you have direct evidence that shows taking steps by countries to recognise a Palestinian state while Hamas, a terrorist group, is in control, does nothing to affect what we all ultimately want, Laura, and that is peace. That's what we all want. Peace, but you do not get peace. Let's be very, very clear by rewarding terrorists.
Sure, but do you support a full takeover from Netanyahu of the Gaza Strip? Is that the pathway to peace?
I've been very clear in my comments. That is a decision. That is an operational and military tactical decision for the Israeli government on the ground. It's as simple
that's
as
a political decision as well. You know how politically charged that would be. Do you accept that part of the reason that these countries, 140 of them, have used their positions to recognise the state of Palestine is because of Netanyahu's perceived or actual overreach here? Does the coalition endorse everything that Netanyahu has done? How do you diverge from any of his position?
Let's be very clear. In the first instance, I have always said on behalf of the coalition that all parties, including Israel, must comply with international law.
And do you think that's happened?
That is an absolute given. If there are allegations or incidents where people are saying that this did not occur, they should be investigated absolutely by the appropriate bodies. But when you look at how this started on October the 7th, 2023, Hamas launched a massive terrorism offensive on Israel. It butchered and slaughtered 1,200 Israelis and it took hostages, many of whom still remain in the tunnels today. It is also a fact, Laura, that at law, Israel has the right to self-defence.
I agree with that.
That is the right that Israel is exercising.
The deaths of 19,000 children in Gaza. It's a question of proportionality.
Let me be very clear again.
Yeah.
Let me be very clear again. Israel must, at all times, act in accordance with international law, as must Hamas. But Hamas doesn't care. International law, Laura, does not apply to terrorists. And as I've said, if there is credible evidence that international law has been breached, of course we support that being investigated. But at the same time, Laura, I am not going to move away from the basic fundamental premise of international law that a country does have the right to defend itself, and Israel is doing that based on what occurred on October the 7th, 2023. But please don't put words in my mouth. I have been very clear. International law must be adhered to.
Okay.
If it is not, it should be investigated.
Netanyahu has overreached here? Or do you support every move he's made?
Oh, look, the mere fact that we support Israel's right to defend itself does not mean that we support every decision by Benjamin Netanyahu. But ultimately, as I said, we're sitting here back in Australia running live commentary on what is going on the ground in Israel. Exactly. The decision that Benjamin Netanyahu has made is an operational and tactical one. I think he needs to be very, very clear with the world what is his end game here, because he needs to ensure that he is bringing the world with him. And you can see at this point in time he is not. But if I go back to fundamental, Laura, basic principles. On October the 7th, 2023, a terrorist organisation dedicated to the destruction of Israel launched a terrorist attack, one of the worst we have seen in history since the Holocaust. At international law, Israel has the right to self-defence, though in saying that, that right must be exercised in accordance with international law. But do not ask me, Laura, to sit here and make excuses for terrorists who are dedicated to the destruction of Israel, because I can tell you right now, I will not do that.
Michaelia Cash, always appreciate your time, especially from Perth this early. I appreciate it.
Great to be with you.